So the Nintendo 64 is the first video game console I'd ever owned, and it was this weird purple transparent one, but I didn't get how weird it looked at the time, but looking back, that's a really weird design choice. Anyway, I have a lot of strong feelings about the Nintendo 64, and none of them come from the fact that I grew up with it. When I think about the Nintendo 64, it's mostly things I dislike about it, and I'm not talking about the controller shape because I've never once had issue using the controller, unlike everyone else. The Z-trigger seems like it's in an excellent position. It feels like a weird combination of those special joysticks you would get to play flight combat simulators and actual game controllers. Maybe that's what they were going for. But when I think back to the Nintendo 64, I'm primarily disappointed at its lackluster library of about 300 games, many of which are shovelware or inferior ports of PS1 titles, and the games on the Nintendo 64 that are unique or interesting, I feel they're trapped on the Nintendo 64. I don't feel they're graced by being on the console, I feel they're stuck there, like they should have been on the PS1 or the Saturn or anything besides the 64. There's also the downside that the console uses bulky, obnoxiously shaped cartridges, and I have to continually slide them in and out of the console until they decide to work properly, unlike PlayStation 1 discs, which still worked the first time I put them in. In spite of recognizing and disliking all of these things about the Nintendo 64 as an adult, as a child I played the Nintendo 64 more than anything else, at least until we got the PlayStation 2. I had a fascination with anything Nintendo 64 related because, to me, each of those cartridges contained a little adventure inside. That doesn't quite explain why I own 3 Nintendo 64 consoles, why we have 8 controllers and several backups of all the cables for the consoles, but I suppose that's a different story. But in spite of my personal dislike of the Nintendo 64, I can't deny that it has some really unique, interesting, and well-designed games on it, Chameleon Twist and Bomberman Hero just being a couple of examples I can think of. So inevitably, while there are tons of other games I share, and I like sharing those games, I want to share Nintendo 64 games from time to time. And that presents an issue. The Nintendo 64 is hell to record from, and getting Nintendo 64 emulators to work is even more hell than recording from the Nintendo 64 directly. Many Nintendo 64 games have an issue that wasn't a noticeable issue when the games came out, where they will frequently switch resolutions in between screens. This makes them nearly impossible to record with a modern game capture. So I decided to do something productive and test specifically which Nintendo 64 games would and would not work as far as recording is concerned. And since I need to record sufficient footage of each game to ensure that it plays properly, I thought, why put all that footage to waste? So I'm going to take these test recordings of Nintendo 64 games, which generally will either play through the first level or area or until I feel the game is confirmed to work properly, and I'll comment over them to briefly talk about the game's design, how I feel about it, and how well it works with my current game capture device, which may not be helpful to anybody, but will probably be entertaining, I hope. Think of it as a pseudo-let's play comprised of mini game analysis videos, which are smaller than normal game analysis videos and also not as detailed, but still hopefully entertaining because I am still talking about game design while playing enjoyable video games, or maybe sometimes games that aren't enjoyable because I own a lot of Nintendo 64 games, some of which are ports of PlayStation 1 games which are superior to their Nintendo 64 counterparts. Period. It should be fun. I get to revisit a lot of games I haven't played in a long time, and you get to see me ramble about their design. Keep in mind that all of the games featured in this Nintendo 64 Test pseudo Let's Play, they're not confirmed to be future Let's Plays, and they're not confirmed to not be future Let's Plays. This has nothing to do with whether these games are possible to Let's Play in the future, it's just to determine whether they can actually be recorded, since my friend at the Long Play Archive does want the full library of Nintendo 64 games recorded at some point. Whether they turn into Let's Plays is another matter entirely. So I'll see you next time for the first actual video, which is of course the fun part in doing this. Wish me luck, and seriously, I do mean wish me luck, because sometimes trying to record Nintendo 64 games crashes my Elgato and my computer. Okay, let's do this.